Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as we know, access to safe and nutritious food is critical to the health and the well-being of people, and even more so for growing children. But the reality is after 9 years of your government, that food insecurity is on the rise in Canada, and that there is more and more moms and dads who are struggling to put food on the table to feed their children and their families. Have you been hearing from your constituents about how expensive groceries have gotten?
Merci pour la question, Monsieur le Président. Et écoutez, je pense que dans toutes les régions.
Thank you for the question. I think that in all parts of Canada, families do have difficulty making ends meet, but saying that it's the fault of one government is sidelining the problem. This is the kind of program we need to help children, particularly in schools. I think that all political parties should focus.
Gotten more expensive for your constituents. We know that we are in an affordability crisis, and in the midst of this affordability crisis, your government chose to increase the carbon tax another 23%. So if you were serious about addressing the food insecurity that's happening right now in our country and is growing, how do you justify supporting a carbon tax that is contributing to the rising cost of groceries?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et je vois que...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see that the Conservative Party probably worked all night formulating questions like these, saying that the carbon tax, Mr. Chairman, is the only factor.
Mr. Chair.
Please state your point of order, Ms. Falk.
Honestly, sitting here as a member of Parliament who works hard all the time, I take issue with taking an attack that I stayed up all night to formulate my questions. This is pertinent to the bill that we are studying at hand, food for children, the affordability crisis.
Thank you, Ms. Falk. Not sure that was a point of order. It was good commentary. Mr. Cormier.
Alors, merci, Monsieur le Président. Et Monsieur...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In 1981, I was in grade 1. There was no carbon tax at the time, and the friends who were beside me sometimes had nothing to eat in their lunch boxes. So saying once more that the carbon tax is the problem, the only problem that's pushing up the price of goods and services and even the price of groceries, is absolutely unacceptable. The school food program that we're trying to establish and the framework we want to put in place is designed to help children so that children in schools can achieve their full potential. In 2024, Canada can't remain one of the only countries
contributing to food insecurity in this country. We have to realize, as legislatures in this place, that our farmers in Canada grow safe, nutritious food, not only to feed Canadians, but also to feed the world. So they are also an integral part in helping with food insecurity abroad. So I think that's very important to note. And we know that this Trudeau carbon tax is particularly punishing for our farmers, and it jeopardizes the long-term viability of farms in Canada, which is where we get our food from. We know that Canadian farmers, as I have said, provide safe, nutritious food, not only to Canadians, but again, to those around the world. So why did you vote against Bill C-234, which would have removed the carbon tax for farmers, making food more affordable for families to purchase?
Monsieur le Président, je pense que les fermiers savent très bien.
Mr. Chairman, I think farmers know full well that climate change probably is the factor that's going to affect them most in the years to come. That's why we're taking measures to protect them. And speaking of farmers, my bill explicitly states that farmers and our entire community will all benefit from a school food program. Mr. Chairman, I was with the Prime Minister making an announcement in my riding, and a farmer in my region is taking part in this and providing fruits and vegetables to local schools. Farmers are aware that they have a role to play with a program like this one.
And they want government to get out of the way so that they can do that and fulfill that role to feed Canadians. So I just want to be clear. Bill C-322 does not actually put any food in the bellies of children. What it does do is it feeds an already bloated bureaucracy. So your government is running the most expensive government in Canadian history, and it's Canadians, unfortunately, that are paying for it. and Canadians who cannot afford it and are in such desperation for relief. In the midst of this affordability crisis, when Canadians are struggling to feed themselves, why would you propose feeding the bureaucracy?
Monsieur le Président, j'espère.
Mr. Chairman, I hope that the witnesses who come after me are listening to the proceedings at the moment. The Conservatives from the very first moment have been opposed to a school food program. What that's telling families listening at home is this: we don't want to help you. We don't want your children to go to school with full bellies. That's exactly what they're telling Canadians, youth and families. A school food program like this one, Mr. Chairman, must be established. It must be there to help children so that they can achieve their full potential.
Whatsoever. I have 4 small children. I know the importance of feeding children, making sure that they do have full tummies so that when they go to school, they can have the concentration to be able to learn and to socialize. What Conservatives are saying is we don't support feeding the bureaucracy. We support mums and dads having money in their pockets to spend on their children and their families in the way that they see that they need to. Not feeding it to the government, not feeding it to the taxman, and then the government saying this is what we're going to use that money for.
Thank you, Ms. Falk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. Mr. Cormier, the first line of your legislation in the preamble reads, quote, "Whereas too many families in Canada cannot reliably obtain enough nutritious food," unquote. So based on this, would you agree that the cost of healthy, nutritious food has increased to the point where it's out of reach for many families?
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Et comme je l'ai dit,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was saying, we are now facing tremendous pressure, not only in Canada, but around the world. Prices are going up everywhere. Regardless of what we're facing, we can't say we won't help children in schools.
In rural communities like yours, would you agree that costs are often higher for things like fuel and nutritious food?
écoutez, encore une fois, ça dépend de certains secteurs. On a des...
Once again, it depends on the sector. Some products and services are much less expensive than they are in places like Montreal. Saying that everything is more expensive in rural area is right. Some industries, some goods and services are more expensive, yes, because some areas are more remote. But what we're talking about here is helping children in schools.
Thank you very much. So would you agree that the carbon tax is adding to the cost of food?
Monsieur le Président, tous les études...
Mr. Chairman, all studies so far are saying the same thing. Unfortunately, this is the line the Conservatives always fall back on, that the carbon tax, the carbon price on pollution is increasing prices everywhere.
So you signed a press release on September 28th, 2023 with your Liberal colleagues, Mr. Long, who's on this committee, and Mr. Arsenault, criticizing the imposition of your Liberal government's carbon tax on residents in the province you live, New Brunswick, because you said the carbon tax, quote, puts the province and its residents at a disadvantage because it does not take into account its strongly rural character. So, Mr. Cormier, do you agree that the carbon tax disadvantages rural families by increasing the cost to grow, ship, warehouse, and ultimately buy food?
Écoutez, Monsieur le Président, premièrement, je suis content.
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I'm very glad to have signed that press release with my colleagues in rural areas in Canada, as I said. There are rural areas that don't have public transit, that don't have alternative transport, unlike in larger cities like Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. What we've done is ask for a 20% adjustment, a 20% premium for people in those regions. All experts who saw us for the press release agree with us. Every region in Canada must be treated fairly and equitably, and that's exactly what the government's done.
So based on that, what you were asking for was for the carbon tax to be removed because of the the high
No.
costs. So or
On n'a jamais
suspended.
demandé.
So
No, we never asked for that.
cost that is for families. So would you also not agree then that the carbon tax is adding to other costs, such as the cost of food?
We never asked for the carbon tax to be removed. We asked for an adjustment for rural region, like I said, because we didn't have the infrastructure like big city have, like public transportation. And look, the government realized that, this was the case. And I think we have to treat every region in Canada fairly. And again, to say that the carbon tax is the only reason that everything is going up in Canada. This is a message I think the Conservatives should need to stop to say, because people are starting not to believe them anymore.
The premise of your bill. So the Liberal carbon tax, we know, does add to the cost of transportation. It adds to the cost of farmers. The Canada Food Price Report predicted that the average family will spend $700 more this year on food. So would you support taking the carbon tax off of all food and all transportation costs for any food that may be grown, transported, and purchased to be used in a school food program?
Monsieur le Président, inflation went down again in Canada this past month. I know that the Conservative doesn't want to talk about the school food program because they vote against it.
Perhaps you haven't seen the Food Bank Canada poverty report or the Salvation Army report that just came out.
What is the point of order?
Chair, I do believe that if a question's asked, and the question that was asked took roughly 30 seconds, I think the members should be allowed the same time.
Mr. Long, that's not a point of order. Ms. Gray, conclude your comments, and then we'll move on to the next one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, obviously the member hasn't seen some of the reports that literally have come out over the last 24 hours, talking about how people can't afford to feed themselves, and how almost 50% of Canadians say that they are having a tougher time than they were even just a year ago.
Short answer, Mr. Cormier.
Et la seule solution que les conservateurs proposent, c'est d'enlever la...
The only solution the Conservatives put forward is removing the carbon tax, but they don't want to help children have meals and snacks in schools when families are having a hard time. The government will always be there to help people. We've put in a lot of social programs since 2015.